Chapter 519 1.5 years. Deep meditation? Everyone from the Tang Sect was stunned when they heard those words. Several hundred people in deep meditation at the same time. Bei laughed. He was always so refined and elegant, and he rarely expressed too much happiness or anger, but there was clearly excitement in his eyes. I didn't misspeak, and you guys heard that right. Everyone went into deep meditation, and those who came too earliest only did so at daybreak. Some of those who have woken up have told me that their entire bodies feel very smooth and clear, while many of their impurities have been expelled. I conducted a simple checkup on them, and discovered that their soul power hasn't improved much, but their martial soul's quality seems to have improved, while their bodies have become stronger. Those who have woken up are the Tang Sect's weakest disciples, and they are comparatively less talented. That also means that the more talented you are, the longer you will be in deep meditation. Everyone exchanged glances, and incredulity flickered in their eyes. What was deep meditation? That was a state that every soul master dreamed of achieving, and a single episode of deep meditation could bring realizations and understanding that was more important than cultivating for several years. Deep cultivation was a process which would directly give a deep understanding of one's martial soul power, and soul skills. It was just like sudden enlightenment, as a sudden enlightenment boosted one's potential. Back then, Huo Yua had an extremely long episode of deep meditation back at the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy. Even though that episode was long, it didn't really boost his soul power, but it was that episode that consolidated his foundation as one of the elites of the younger generation. From that, one could see how important deep meditation was for soul masters. This was an improvement of one's talents. However, several hundred soul masters going through deep meditation at the same time was an event that had never happened before across the Douluo continent's entire history. Something like that was impossible to imagine, but everything was clearly happening because of the Kayaken fortune pill's medicinal aroma. Even the pill's medicinal aroma could produce such immense effects. So how intense would the effects of the pill itself be? Everyone's eyes began to burn with passion inside the conference hall. A crystal bottle was brought out and filled to the brim with clear water, while over a dozen smaller cups were taken out at the same time. Bei nodded in Huo Yua's direction and said, "Let's begin." Huo Yua nodded. He took out the jade bottle that contained the Kayaken fortune pills as everyone looked on passionately. Once he opened the bottle, a strange aroma wafted out. This fragrance wasn't thick, but it was extremely penetrative. Everyone could smell it as soon as it was released, and a feeling that numbed their skull surfaced as they felt like all their pores had been opened in the next moment. It was a very comfortable and relaxing sensation. The pill itself was white and lustrous, and there seemed to be clouds drifting around inside it, as if the pill itself contained life energy. Huo Yua covered the jade bottle and placed a single Kayaken fortune pill into the crystal bottle. The crystal bottle also had a cap. Huo Yua immediately covered the bottle with its cap after tossing in the pill so that its medicinal effects wouldn't dissipate. A strange scene occurred once the Kayaken fortune pill fell into the water. The originally clear and still water began to boil and roil, and everything inside it became foggy and cloudy. The white fog gradually turned golden, and then an even stranger thing happened. Scenes that reflected the sun and moon's glory seemed to flash and flicker within the golden liquid, and the crystal bottle radiated with intense and brilliant light. Everyone exchanged looks, and nobody could hide the bedazzlement in their eyes. Huo Yua was the person who had crafted the pill, and he couldn't help but take a deep breath before he said, "The Kayaken fortune pill does live up to its claim of containing the good fortune of heaven and earth. From my perspective, I think we have done this right by accident. With its medicinal effects, we may not be able to handle it if we had taken one pill each. At least, we absolutely cannot ingest one pill in one go. Otherwise, we might run into big trouble." From when Bei was talking about the Tang Sect's disciples going through deep meditation together to the strange scenes that they were witnessing from the Kayaken fortune pill now, everyone could see its frightening medicinal powers. Nobody expected that a tiny pill like that could possess such forceful and terrifying effects. Huo Yua used his spiritual power to observe, and only reopened the bottle after the golden liquid inside the crystal bottle had completely settled down. He poured the liquid equally into all the little cups that had been taken out. This time, perhaps because the pill had been dissolved into water, its fragrance was more than 10 times denser than before. "Hurry and drink it. Don't let its medicinal effects dissipate." Huo Yua immediately reminded everyone after pouring everything out. Everyone no longer dared to delay as they took their respective cups and finished the fluid in one gulp. The fluid was plain and tasteless, and it didn't seem that much different from drinking clear water. But before anyone could start guessing or sensing the changes to their body, everyone felt a wave of burning heat rising up and coursing over their bodies. The people here belonged to the Tang Sect's inner circle, and they were naturally different from the other disciples. The individual with the lowest cultivation rank was a soul emperor, while they were also prepared before ingesting the fluid. They immediately sat down and crossed their legs one by one and began to meditate in an attempt to catalyze the medicinal effects with their soul power. But they realized after sitting down that they didn't have to catalyze anything at all. The medicinal effects reached every corner of their bodies after releasing itself, and the terrifying medicinal powers barged around through their passageways forcibly. Everyone could see a patch of gold when they looked inside themselves. Tanya was the only one who didn't drink, but she could smell the dense medicinal aroma in the air, and even though she was weak, she could still feel that refreshing and comfortable sensation. Furthermore, she could observe most clearly because she was an onlooker. A golden hue appeared over everyone's bodies after they ingested the fluid. That golden color wasn't soul power. Instead, it was a kind of airflow that seemed very obscure and faint. The medicinal aroma inside the conference hall didn't dampen because they had consumed the medicinal fluids, but became denser instead, like everyone's bodies couldn't hold back the medicinal fragrance. This time, the aroma was emanating from everyone's bodies. Such powerful medicinal effects. This was a single Kayaken fortune pill split into more than a dozen servings, and even then, it still possessed such intense effects. Tanya couldn't help but draw in a cold breath. Bei had already told her that Huo Yua had decided to give one of the pills to her, but now, that decision didn't seem very realistic. Tanya knew that her body was weak, and if she took one pill all by herself, she would probably be so weak that the pill would make her much worse. Fortunately, everyone else went ahead to try the pill's effects before she had. Huo Yua could feel his soul power roiling in his body. He and Tang Wutong had the highest cultivation rank among everyone here besides Sun Zwen, the soul engineer. The truth was, in terms of how pure their soul power was and in terms of total volume, Huo Yua probably even surpassed Sun Zwen. That was the reason why what he felt was the most vivid. The medicinal fluid almost didn't stop when it entered his body, and it began to spread from his abdomen. Huo Yua immediately felt like his soul power began to undulate and spurt like a geyser from the pill's effects. The soul power inside his passageways, his skeleton, and his organs began to turn to pure gold. But Huo Yua could still maintain clarity in his mind in this moment. Even though the formidable medicinal strength was stimulating him to the point where he almost couldn't move, he still managed to spin around as soon as possible while he pulled Tang Wutong's hands up and placed their palms together. Haodong power naturally began to circulate between them. Strangely, the initially intense medicinal effects immediately settled down when they began to channel Haodong power, just like tidal waves from a large surging river suddenly flowing into the boundless ocean. Their expressions immediately became relaxed. The medicinal effects were still strong, but there seemed to be a special force inside their Haodong power that could suppress the medicinal effects instead of allowing them to spread completely and wreak havoc. Huo Yua was experiencing a very special sensation. He felt like the Kayaken fortune pill was a catalyzer for soul power. Tang Wutong and his soul power was improving at a surprising speed under the effects of this catalyzer, resembling the rising of the tide. Furthermore, their soul power wasn't the only thing that was changing. Even their spirits were being nourished along with their passageways. Their bodies became smooth and clear, while there were already very few impurities within their bodies. In this moment, the Kayaken fortune pill made them feel like their entire body was transparent, and that purest and most direct improvement caused a faint smile to appear on both their faces. The medicine's effects were absorbed extremely quickly, but because their passageways were also being refined by the pill, Huo Yua and Tang Wutong didn't feel any swelling in their bodies. The entire process took but 15 minutes, while the pill's effects were almost completely absorbed. Huo Yua and Tang Wutong realized to their pleasant surprise that their soul power rank had clearly improved a lot, by a difference of almost 2 ranks. A single Kayaken fortune pill was split into more than 10 different servings, while their cultivation were already past 80. Furthermore, improving their soul power was secondary, while strengthening their own bodies was absolutely beneficial for becoming a tidal Douluo in the future. They opened their eyes at the same time, as if by telepathy. Huo Yua and Tang Wutong looked at each other, and they could see the joy in each other's eyes. Huo Yua's soul power had almost reached rank 83 after the previous 4 months of hard hard work and assiduous cultivation before consuming the medicinal fluid, while Tang Wutong's situation was similar to his. After consuming the medicine, their cultivation had improved enormously after just a short 15 minutes. They didn't just break through rank 83, they even broke through rank 84, and they were now right between rank 84 and rank 85. They were already 8 ring soul Douluo, and improving one's cultivation was an extremely slow and difficult affair once a soul master obtained their 8th soul ring. But they weren't normal people, and their soul power possessed special characteristics that normal soul masters didn't. In addition to the effects of their hard-on power, their cultivation speed was already faster than normal people. This time, they were overjoyed because their cultivation had directly improved by so much due to the Kayaken fortune pill's effects. Huro Yuao could faintly feel that if he and Tang Wutong took one entire pill each, they could possibly directly break through to become titled Douluo. This pill's effects were just too powerful. However, they were quickly jolted back to reality after feeling their improved cultivation ranks, and the reason was simple: the other situations were vastly different from theirs, and some were even in some trouble. Huro Yuao and Tang Wutong smiled at each other, and immediately felt the excessively dense medicinal aroma inside the conference hall as they subconsciously turned towards the other individuals beside them. Their facial expressions changed a little with that glance. Shrek's 7 monsters were doing all right because their cultivation ranks were relatively higher. Even though their eyebrows were locked in a faint frown, they could still hold on, while the medicinal auras that they were emanating weren't considered too dense. However, the others who had relatively lower cultivation ranks like Dalu, Namkyukayu, and Nana were in trouble. The golden light on their bodies was the strongest, and golden light could even be faintly seen along their veins under their skin. While their bodies were trembling vigorously, all Tanya could do was worry as she looked on from the side. Her body was weak, and even though she still had her soul power, she couldn't muster it at all because of those evil toxins. Furthermore, she didn't even know how to deal with the situation at hand. Wutong, quick! Huro Yuao pulled Tang Wutong and arrived behind Dalu in a flash. Dalu's cultivation was comparatively lower than the rest, and he was also a soul engineer, so his soul power was quite a far cry from the soul masters who had studied in Shrek Academy. The same was true for his bodily strength. The Kayaken fortune pill's effects were just too strong. Dalu didn't have hard-on power, and the forceful medicinal effects wreaked havoc inside his body as they barged around hysterically. Even though they were refining and improving his passageways and increasing his soul power, the process was pummeling his body. His entire frame was swollen, like he was a bomb that could explode at any moment. Huro Yuao pulled Tang Wutong and arrived behind him swiftly. They reached out with one palm each and pressed them against his back, while they held each other's hands at the same time. Just as Huro Yuao had predicted, their Hodog power had a suppressive effect against the Kayaken fortune pill's effects. Just like back when Huro Yuao had first attempted to fuse his martial soul with Tang Wutong's, this suppression was entirely hierarchical. Like these forces and energies had their own ranks and hierarchy. The medicinal effects in Dalu's body immediately settled down after the hard-on power coursed through him, and he heaved a deep sigh of relief. Soul power flowed within his body as he swiftly absorbed the pill's effects. However, their hard-on power unwittingly absorbed some of the medicinal effects once it entered his body. Huro Yuao and Tang Wutong didn't want that to happen. Those bits and pieces that attached themselves to their hard-on power were parts that Dalu couldn't absorb at all. Differences in physiques also meant a world of difference in one's ability to absorb natural treasures. Dalu's situation stabilized after a few minutes. Huro Yuao and Tang Wutong withdrew their palms as they arrived behind Nana. Nana was already a soul emperor, but she also started off as a soul engineer, and she was just a close combat soul engineer. In addition to her martial soul special characteristics, her body was relatively weaker. Huro Yuao and Tang Wutong used the same method to help her stabilize her body. The two of them then judged according to how quickly their companions were absorbing the pill's effects in their respective situations, and helped them resolve their problems accordingly. The difference in everyone's cultivations could be seen from how they were absorbing the pill's effects. In the end, the other 5 who were part of Shrek's 7 monsters, Sun Zwen, and Ji Jukin didn't need Huro Yuao and Tang Wutong's help, as they completed the absorption by themselves. They helped everyone else to varying extents, and Yu Yi was the best off among those who required help. There was a saying that kindness would always be rewarded. In the process of going to everyone's aid, those leftover medicinal effects that everyone couldn't absorb naturally entered Huro Yuao and Tang Wutong's bodies. When everyone's situations were stabilized, their cultivation ranks broke through to rank 85 at almost the same time. Huro Yuao waved his right hand and released a layer of spiritual power as they separated the conference hall from the outside world, and the medicine's fragrance permeated the air. This fragrance was also beneficial, and everyone could absorb some of its effects as they cultivated. They couldn't afford to waste the Kayaken fortune pill's effects, not even a little bit. Huro Yuao directed the entire situation as he quietly observed Tanya. Tanya didn't take the pill, but she had absorbed quite a bit of the pill's aroma after all the time that had passed. Huro Yuao used spiritual detection, and observed that even though the Kayaken fortune pill's medicinal aroma didn't help her eliminate the toxins in her body, and neither could it awaken her martial soul's power, it could refine and improve her body, and it strengthened her resistance and immune system. In other words, even though Tanya's circumstance didn't improve, the Kayaken fortune pill's aroma slowed her deterioration. Simply put, the Kayaken fortune pill's aroma strengthened Tanya's physique, and caused her life energy to flow away at an even slower speed. In addition to the fact that the Life Guardian blade was continuously supplying her with life energy, Tanya's circumstances were already starting to change for the better. At least, her life would definitely be prolonged. Huro Yuao was immediately elated with that discovery. In the end, Tanya hadn't actually taken the pill yet. Of course, Huro Yuao knew that she couldn't directly take a single pill, as its effects were too strong, but that didn't mean that she couldn't take any at all. The effects would be the same as long as the pill was diluted like it was today before it was fed to her bit by bit. That way, her situation could first be stabilized so that they would have more time in the future to search for the Blue Silver Emperor so that her martial soul could be awakened. Huro Yuao heaved a sigh of relief with that judgment. Teacher Xiaoya's problems are finally resolved. Everyone who was absorbing the medicinal effects came to one after another with Huro Yuao's help. Those who had absorbed relatively less woke up earlier, and Dalu was the first who recovered from his meditation. Dalu just bolted away after recovering. He had no choice but to run, as the Kayaken fortune pill's effects forced out all the impurities in his body. He was covered with a layer of dirt and filth, and reeked terribly. He loved alcohol with his life, and his body wasn't that strong in the first place. Even though he didn't absorb much of the medicine's effects this time, the improvements and ameliorations that he had experienced were the greatest. Everyone's circumstances weren't that different from Dalu, and they returned to their respective rooms after waking up one after another to clean themselves up. Bei Bei, Shu Sanchi, and Ji Juiken were the last to wake up. They were even a little later than Sun Zwen. Sun Zwen didn't say much after he woke up, but he gave Huro Yuao a thumbs up. His cultivation rank was the highest, and it didn't seem like his body had improved much on the surface, as he had consumed many medicines in the past to refine and improve his body. However, he was clear that all the hidden problems in his body had been eliminated after consuming the Kayaken fortune pill, and his soul power was showing signs of improvement. This meant that if he worked hard to cultivate, he still had a chance to increase his soul power. That was absolutely an unexpected surprise. Bei Bei, Shu Sanchi, and Ji Juiken had the least impurities in their bodies. Even though their bodies were still a little sticky, they didn't have to run away immediately after completing their absorption. How do you feel, eldest senior brother? Huro Yuao asked Bei Bei concernedly. These 3 had completely absorbed the pill's effects. Bei Bei smiled faintly and said, I feel fantastic. Shu Sanchi laughed heartily and said, I don't just feel fantastic. I feel like I'm on cloud 9. I can feel that my soul power has improved by 5 ranks, and I'm almost at the bottleneck to rank 80. I suspect Bei Bei has experienced something similar. Bei Bei nodded, confirming Shu Sanchi's words. That isn't the most important part. I can feel that my martial soul's intrinsic quality has also improved, and my spirit has been nourished. My cultivation in the future should be much quicker and more efficient. Huro Yuao said, if you reach the bottleneck at rank 80, why don't you guys try to add another spirit? That should be fine, considering your spiritual power. But Bei Bei and Shu Sanchi shook their heads at the same time. Bei Bei said, we have a lot of chemistry with our spirits. We don't need another one. Furthermore, our spirits have more abilities that they can bestow upon us, and that's sufficient for us to increase our strength and abilities. When the time is right, we will naturally obtain our 8th soul rings. Huro Yuao took a long breath. That was just the effects of a single Kayaken fortune pill. The entire group benefited from just a single pill. Shu Sanchi and Bei Bei had the highest cultivations among everyone else. Their soul power had increased by around 5 ranks. So how about their other companions who only had around 6 soul rings? Their cultivations had to increase by a lot more. Huro Yuao was very happy. He hadn't wasted his time over the past few months after all, as raising the Tang Sect's overall strength was very important. Eldest senior brother, when are you going to let teacher Xiaoyu take the pill? Who are you out? Asked Bei Bei. Bei Bei replied, the Kayaken fortune pill's medicinal effects are too strong. I don't think Xiaoya can take one by herself. Why don't we do it like we have done today? We can divide the rest of the pills among everyone else. Who are you? Shook his head and said, any medicine is most effective when you first consume it. Teacher Xiaoya's situation is unique, and dilution is a must. Furthermore, she has to consume less every time than we did today, but she can do it continuously so that she can digest and absorb its effects. This time, I am confident of ensuring that teacher Xiaoya's body won't deteriorate any further. With that, he told Bei Bei about what he had observed from Tang Ya's body and his own judgment. Bei Bei was overjoyed. Great. That's just great. However, somehow, I feel like Xiaoya doesn't need an entire pill's effects. Little junior brother, you and Tang Wutong should consume the rest of the pills. The two of you are the Tang Sect's strongest fighting force now, and only the two of you can fight like title Douluo with your martial soul fusion. The academy has high hopes for the two of you. I suggest that the two of you take one more pill each, so that you can become title Douluo as quickly as possible. Who are you? Smiled faintly and said, eldest senior brother, increasing our soul power by relying on our own cultivation is best. Using medicine to boost our cultivation, even if they're natural treasures, is not as consolidated or solid compared to doing so through our own cultivation. We have already drawn upon a lot of medicinal effects this time, and we still have to rely on our own cultivation to stabilize and consolidate. We will be spoiling things by undue haste if we take any more. With our current cultivation speed, we can still increase our cultivation relatively quickly even without pills and medicine. Bei Bei nodded and answered, then do it your way. Who are you? Continued. As for the remaining 6 pills, can I ask that you give one of them to eldest Sun, eldest senior brother? Tell him the effects these pills had on us, and I hope that he can use one to raise his cultivation rank to become an ultimate Douluo. One of the remaining 5 will be given to teacher Xiaoya to treat her, and the last 4 will be dealt with according to the plan that we originally discussed. However, we have to push back the date that we plan to consume another one. We have to wait for at least 3 months before we consume another one, and then another 3 months before we do so again. That way, we can maximize the pill's effects, and we can also give everyone sufficient time to stabilize and consolidate their cultivation. Bei Bei answered, all right, let's do it your way, but you should give the pill to eldest and yourself. Who are you? Laughed and said, eldest senior brother, you and teacher Xiaoya are the Tang Sect's leaders. This is the Tang Sect's gift to the academy, not just my own. Bei Bei immediately understood what he was trying to say, and stared deeply into Hu Yuao's eyes before he patted his shoulder. Hu Yua continued, eldest senior brother, after this, I plan to use my time mainly for studying soul tools and closed-door cultivation. I am afraid I won't be able to help you with the Sect's affairs. Bei Bei nodded and said, you don't have to worry about the Tang Sect's affairs. Everyone else and I will deal with them. The most important thing for you is to work hard to increase your cultivation along with Tang Wutong. Yes. The Tang Sect passed an order to keep the episode with the Kayaken fortune pill quiet, and nobody was allowed to spread news of it to the outside world. The truth was, only the Tang Sect's core members knew exactly how strong the Kayaken fortune pill's effects were. A single pill was sent to the Sea God's Pavilion, and Elder Sun went into closed-door cultivation afterwards, but he wasn't the only one. The Martial Soul Department's Ding Yan Shaosh, and the Soul Tool Department's Ding Shen Liner accompanied him. Hu Yuao and Tang Wutong also entered a state of semi-closed-door cultivation. Hu Yuao would take out 6 hours every day to learn about forging soul tools from Sun Swen, and he would spend the remainder of his day cultivating with Tang Wutong. The Tang Sect became busier than before, and everything was going according to plan. The Sun Moon Empire grew quiet, seemingly because the detonation of Hu Yuao's annihilation storm had dealt an overwhelmingly heavy blow to them. The front lines were also very peaceful. The Sun Moon Empire seemed to do nothing else besides consolidating the territory that they had conquered from the Heavenly Soul Empire. The Soul Master legions that the Daluo Empire had sent into the Sun Moon Empire's territory to do battle were also gradually withdrawn, as the Sun Moon Empire had mustered their relatively stronger Soul Engineer legions to exterminate them. The Daluo Empire's Soul Masters experienced heavy losses after several skirmishes, and they had no choice but to retreat back through the Mingdo Mountain range to rest and readjust. However, with the Mingdo Mountain range as a barrier and their experience from before, the Daluo Empire had temporarily stabilized their defensive perimeter along their borders. The White Tiger Duke was still personally holding down the fort as they maintained their standoff against the Sun Moon Empire. The war seemed to have come to a temporary pause, but there was still one thing that made the Daluo Empire, the Heavenly Soul Empire, and the Doling Empire very concerned. Even though the war seemed to have paused temporarily, the Sun Moon Empire had strengthened their lockdown on surveillance and intelligence. They continuously transported aerial and ground-based surveillance soul tools toward the border so that they could shut down all information as tightly as possible. It became overwhelmingly difficult for the Douluo continent's 3 native empires to conduct any reconnaissance within the Sun Moon Empire's territories. The Sun Moon Empire's territory was already the largest within the Douluo continent, and in addition to 2/3 of the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory, the surface area of their territory was now considerably larger. Everyone knew that the war wouldn't just end here, and when it erupted once more, it would likely be a thunderous and possibly final and all-out invasion that the Sun Moon Empire would bring. Everyone was just accumulating their strength and waiting. What they were competing about was how quickly they could accumulate strength. Half a year passed, and everything was still very quiet and peaceful. The Sun Moon Empire seemed like they had ceased their belligerence, and they even reduced the troops that they had stationed along the Heavenly Soul Empire's borders. However, the Heavenly Soul Empire's territories that the Sun Moon Empire had conquered appeared far too tranquil. Half a year had gone by, but there were rarely any uprisings and whatnot, and even the reclusive Sect seemed like they had given up on resisting and fighting back. 6 months flew by one after another, and a year and a half had gone by since Hu Yuao forged the Kayaken fortune pills. He had already been cultivating within Shrek City for almost 2 years. Within these 2 years, the Tang Sect's disciples were almost about to forget that there was such an elite individual inside the Tang Sect, not to mention outsiders. Phew, Hu Yuao gradually opened his eyes as he exhaled deeply, but his eyes were filled with exasperation. Tang Wutong was sitting opposite him, and she patted his hands as she said, don't worry, we can do it. Hu Yuao tilted his head slightly and said, I had already guessed that this would be difficult, but I didn't expect it to be difficult to this extent. Tang Wutong smiled faintly and said, but everything will be different once you succeed. Hu Yuao smiled and answered, don't worry, as long as I have you by my side, I will never give up. Furthermore, I am more confident. They had remained inside the Tang Sect's underground base to cultivate after consuming the Kayaken fortune pill. This place was the quietest, and it was conducive and convenient for Hu Yuao to learn from Sun Swen. Tang Wutong returned to her own room to cultivate after eating lunch, while Hu Yuao arrived at Sun Swen's laboratory as usual. Teacher Sun, Hu Yuao had just stepped into the door when he saw Sun Swen sitting there with a blank look on his face. Sun Swen appeared younger than he was 1.5 years ago. Even though he was deep in thought, his eyes were still incredibly sharp. The Tang Sect's members had consumed 3 of the remaining Kayaken fortune pills as a group, and everyone received unexpected benefits. Shrek's 7 monsters had all obtained 8 soul rings, and Ji Juiken had reached rank 89. He was just 1 step away from becoming a title Douluo, but Ji Juiken wasn't considered the strongest within the Tang Sect, and neither was Hu Yuao. Hu Yuao was just like him, still stuck at rank 89. Hu Yuao should have broken through a long time ago in theory, but he had reached a tremendous bottleneck. This bottleneck stemmed from the soul core that he had formed. He had already guessed that he would have a lot of trouble forming his second soul core because he already possessed his first one, but the difficulty far exceeded his expectations. The medicinal fluids that came from dissolving 3 Kayaken fortune pills had already raised his cultivation to 89 a year ago, but he was still at rank 89 even after 1 year. This was so even though he was cultivating with Haodong power. Furthermore, he was in closed-door cultivation, and he toiled day and night to cultivate without a single second of idleness. Yet, he still remained at rank 89. Therefore, he wasn't the strongest individual within the Tang Sect. Now, the Tang Sect truly possessed a homebred title Douluo besides Sun Swen, who was a class 9 soul engineer. That person was Tang Wutong. Tang Wutong had broken through 7 months ago, and finally earned her title. She gave herself the title of Winter Butterfly, the Winter Butterfly Douluo, Tang Wutong. Winter was so that she could commemorate that she was once Wangdonga, and Butterfly was naturally because of her martial soul. Tang Wutong had already formed her soul core successfully, and was now titled Douluo. How could Hu Yuao not be worried? But forming his second soul core wasn't something that he could just accomplish hastily. He wouldn't have reached rank 89 so quickly without his first soul core, but forming his second soul core was just far too difficult. But his mentality was still positive. Even though he was eager to improve, he wasn't impatient because he had Tang Wutong by his side. Soul masters could accumulate their cultivation. Just as Tang Wutong had said, even though forming his second soul core was difficult, his cultivation would increase rapidly once the that was successful, and he would swiftly reach another level. You're here. Sun Zuen waved to Huo Yuao and gestured for him to sit down. Huo Yuao sat down on a chair next to Sun Zuen and asked, "How is it? Have you made any headway?" Sun Zuen sighed and shook his head. Huo Yuao hurriedly attempted to console him. "Don't worry, teacher Sun. We have already taken 99 out of 100 steps. We just have this final hiccup. We'll take it slow, and we will continue only after we have found the best way to move forward. You're tiring yourself out too much nowadays. Why don't you take a break?" A faint smile appeared at the corner of Sun Zwen's mouth. "Who says I haven't? I have hiccuped something out," even though his expression appeared a little indecent when he was saying those words. Huo Yuao still widened his eyes as he said with a shaky voice, You've succeeded." Sun Zuen nodded gently and said, "At least, in theory." Huo Yuao's jaw hung open as his eyes were open wide. "Then why did you shake your head?" Sun Zuen answered, "I shook my head because it cannot be replicated. Even though forging it is extremely difficult, we can still complete it between the two of us. But the conditions for using it are too demanding, and I can't think of anybody else in the world who can use it besides you." Huo Yuao heaved a sigh of relief. "You're not very nice, teacher Sun. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.